Hey guys, you're listening to the iPath Convo podcast on what is a very special day because today is International Choreographers Day. We are joined by Rick Chia. Rick is the CEO of Choreography Online, which is an online platform that sells performance rights for dance choreography on behalf of choreographers worldwide. He was principal dancer with La 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 Human Steps and performed with other companies such as Ballet Austin and Boston Ballet, to name but a few. More recently, Rick worked as a talent scout for Cirque du Soleil. Thanks for joining us, Rick. How's your day going?
Thanks. Not bad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah? How are you coping with lockdown?
Oh, well, I'm kind of sick of it, but all good. All good.
Good. So today we're going to talk about choreography, mainly because you've just written the iPath choreography syllabus, which we'll get onto later. But before I'm going to ask you what your definition is of choreography. But before I ask you, I thought I'd state what the actual definition is according to the Oxford English Dictionary. You ready for this?
Yes.
So their definition is the sequence of steps and movements in dance or figure skating, especially in a ballet or a stage dance. That's it. That's their definition. So what's
Well,
well, I can't say it. What does choreography mean to you?
well, that's kind of it in a nutshell, but it's a little more complex now because that definition was created, I think, before all the different kinds of dances that we have today and different ways we use choreography today even existed. Because there's acrobatic choreography, um, and that includes circus acts and all that. But I think that the basic underlying meaning is still pretty much the same. It's creating a sequence of movements, of happenings that become a finished piece. Now, there's no minimum length of time that's really attributed to that definition, but that's basically what it is. Now, when you get into actual copyright definitions, it gets a little tricky because the old definition in Canada, and it differs from country to country, the old definition required it to be to have a storyline and required it to be a dramatic. It's in most, like the UK, the Canada, Australia, and the United States, they still are calling it a dramatic work.
Yeah.
Although in Canada, since the early 80s, there no longer has to be a storyline. So that is the basic definition, although it doesn't necessarily have to be ballet, but is basically a sequence, a set sequence of steps or movements that as a whole become an actual work, regardless of how long it is.
Cool. So who inspires you in terms of choreographers?
That's kind of a wide open question, because, well, I think inspiration is because we get inspired in different ways, and we get inspired from different people for different reasons. And I think there are people who inspire me because of historically what they've done and what because everything's contextual. So
Yeah.
I could say someone like William Forsythe
Hmm.
definitely inspired me. But if you look at his old work today, you might say, oh, well, that's not such a big deal.
Yeah.
But it was then when he created it. When he created it, there's a lot of stuff in his old works where you would look at it and say, oh, but everyone does that. But then you realize, well, everyone does it because of him. He
Yeah.
was the one who brought that style. There are people like Paris Gebel in the hip hop world that inspire me to a certain extent. But then there's also there like everyone has their flaws, right? And then there are certain things about her that that I would do differently.
Yeah.
So I think there are different levels of inspiration, different reasons for inspiration. But
And I suppose as a choreographer, it's not just choreographers that inspire choreographers, it's musicians and it can be anything, can't it, really?
inspiration can come from anywhere, and inspiration can come from anything. It can come from anyone,
Yeah.
and you don't have to. It's actually an interesting question when you think about it. And actually a common question when people will say, "Well, whose work inspires you?" what choreographers, but inspiration can come from someone who's not even a professional, who's not in the dance world at all. I mean, there
Yeah.
are people who inspire me with respect to choreographic work who are not even choreographers. It's just something about them that inspires an idea, inspires a feeling, inspires something. It all starts with something simple, and then often blossoms and snowballs into something completely out of control and way too expensive. But it often starts with something simple.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're choreographing something, do you have like a set process that you follow before you get your final product? So, I've sat in some of your classes before, and I've
Mm.
seen you do like some short courses and things, and they're absolutely amazing. Like, I love the way that you kind of break all the inhibitions and stuff down that the dancers tend to start with, and then you get them to create something, and then you give them a stimulus, and then they have to really think about the movement and what it means and stuff. Is there actually, when you're working with professional dancers, do you have a proper process that you follow all the time?
No, I do not. And in fact, I actually think that that is a very common trap.
Yeah.
And we hear people talk about all the time. There are other podcasts and interviews and all that stuff, and often people will be asked the question, what is your creative process, or what is the creative process? And the fact of saying the creative process or your creative process implies that there's only one. And
Yeah.
and if there's only one, everyone knows that the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing in the same way over and over and over again, and expecting a different result. Well, if you have only one process, one way of doing things, you're going to most likely end up with a lot of the same kind of thing, or very similar. So to me, I think it's kind of a trap. No, I don't have one process. I think it just I sometimes I'll start with music. Sometimes I'll start with a structure. Sometimes I'll start with just playing around with movement. Sometimes I will just watch the dancers improvise and say, what are the personalities of these dancers, and how can we bring those personalities out? So um, um, yeah, I can bounce around, and it doesn't mean that if I start with structure, I'm only going to do that once. But I think each context is different, and each set of dancers is different, and each um, uh, show is going to be different. And I don't usually recommend that people have one set process all the time.
Yeah. I suppose nowadays as well, particularly, I think back in the day, a choreographer kind of specialized in one thing. So, for example, George Balanchine would have just done staged ballets. Um, Alvin Ailey probably just did stage performances as well. Whereas now, I think choreographers tend to kind of do a whole variety of things. So you might have, I know I've got so many choreographer friends that do one day they could be choreographing a Broadway show, the next day they could be choreographing something for television channel or a movie. So I suppose they can't really have a process for that, can they? Because
I think there are more people who are versatile in different ways than they were before.
yeah,
Like before, I think the dancers were more versatile, because you had to be because of the musical theater era. Everyone was a triple threat, right?
yeah,
At least, and a real triple threat, not a dancer who sings on the side.
yeah.
They all studied and trained constantly, every week, every day, on all three of those. With respect to being choreographer, I think there are more and more people who are diversified.
Hmm.
But as far as their creative process, most of them, I would venture to say most of them actually only have one creative process. They'll do a different style, but they'll start everything the same way. They'll say, well, I always start with, creating 8 counts or whatever. That's just an example. I just pulled that out of the hat. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's difficult to change your process if you're not used to it.
yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, and this isn't just in in the dance world, this is like in every industry, I think these words are used, but so many choreographers always use those all too common buzzwords, originality and innovation. What does originality and innovation mean? Because everyone says that their choreography is original and innovative.
Yeah, I think if you go back to definitions, we talk about innovation. It's doing something, or by doing something in a different way, in a way that no one else has done before, in a nutshell. And it doesn't mean that you can't use things that have been done before. Just like choreography, a lot, like if you go into ballet, everyone's got the same steps, but it is that sequence, the way you put them together and the way you ask people to perform them, that is what makes it unique and original. Because we all know the old adage that says everything's been done. Now, um, I don't know if that's true or not, but I think that a lot has already been done.
Yeah.
So when you come to originality, it's gonna be hard to take small bits of things and say, oh, this is original, like a movement or whatever. It's really the way you use what you have, because most creators are inspired or take elements from previous work, and that is just normal. That is, depending to what extent you do that and how you do that, that's not stealing. That is just normal. That's We build upon what we know from before. Um, but to go into innovation, I think innovation, you have to think about globally. If you're innovating, that's a bold statement, because you're saying that I'm doing something that no one's done before, and not just I'm doing something that I haven't done before. And just to give you a small anecdote from Cirque du Soleil that had some of us laughing, internally, or the cafeteria at Cirque used to. I remember an announcement in our newsletter. There was this article in the company newsletter that said the cafeteria is innovating, and it was all about them adding the possibility to pay for your meal with a credit card. And we were like, well, innovation is not, just because you haven't done it before doesn't make it innovation. The whole world is using credit cards, and we appreciated the fact that we could now pay with credit cards, but that the word didn't fit. It's not innovation. So innovation is a bold world, and I know everyone's using it today, but I would use it sparingly and carefully.
So you were just talking about Cirque du Soleil. What was it like working for Cirque du Soleil? Because you've had a number of roles within the company, haven't you? And I'm just wondering what it was like to work for, because I think everyone knows and everyone would probably agree that Cirque du Soleil was like the ultimate company that really does innovate and is original.
I
Especially
think
at a charging like £150 a ticket, they have to.
well, I think that just like any other company, I mean, there are good things and bad things, things that you love and things that frustrate you, and Cirque du Soleil is no exception. Um, it was a great place to work. It really was. And they have a lot of at core values that I agree with, and that are very uh, um, like at its base, it was very employee oriented, but then in practice, sometimes those things got skipped over. For what reason, I'm not sure. So, it was a big machine. So this is the other thing, is that your company may have a certain set of values and a certain way of doing things that they want, or a certain way of treating employees, um, that is in their values. But when you have 5,000 employees, you can't guarantee that all the directors and all the people in charge of their teams are going to seriously follow those rules. So just like any big company, it was inconsistent, and
Yeah.
I was lucky to be in a department where we had a vice president who really cared about the people in the department, and it was very appreciated. And but I think, as far as, and the same thing with innovation, we had, um, like people look at Cirque du Soleil and think, wow, this is just a brilliant, innovative company. But 5,000 people, not everyone in the company is brilliant and innovative. And that's normal for any big company. You can't have, not everyone can be, the chiefs or the
Yeah,
engineer. So
absolutely.
so yeah, like it was a great place to work, and um, just like any other company, there were frustrations as well. There were people that, like the example I just gave you. I don't know who was at the head of that idea, but there are people who are not innovative in the company, and there are others that are, and so you just kind of have to pick the people who you want to follow, the people who inspire you. But there are always going to be people that yes, you have to work with them, and it's all pleasant and all, but they're not necessarily the ones who are driving your inspiration.
Yeah, no, I get that. How did Cirque du Soleil find their choreographers for each of their shows? What was the kind of process for that?
There was, yeah, there was no process. I mean, for casting people on stage, there was a protocol, there was a process, there was a way of doing things, and that is because it comes mainly from the casting department, which was a bit more organized, a little more progressive with respect to knowledge of technology, knowledge of the future, or just like forward thinking than the rest of the company. So, sorry, I forgot all my devices are ringing at once. Um, so now I forgot the question. That just took me out of it.
The process of how Cirque du Soleil found its
Oh
choreographers
yeah,
for shows.
yeah. So the choreographers, but for the choreographers, there was no process.
Mm,
It's basically every new creative team that's put together will decide who they want to be as far as other creators. So you have a creative director, and then you have a show director, and they get together, and those two pretty much have the final say. The creative director is the one who has the final say um, on any given production. But obviously that person is going to respect the show director's wishes as much as is possible. And those two are pretty much the ones who are going to pick the composer or the choreographers. And so the way they pick is different every time. It was completely random. Now
yeah.
we used to have a kind of like a database of creators for a few years, and we had 3 people that ran that were kind of talent scouts for creators, I guess you would call them. That wasn't their title, but that's basically what they did.
Hmm.
And um, and that was quite nice because they would basically filter, do a quality filter and pertinence filter, and I think it was something that could have been used more, and at some point it got phased out because I think the creative teams were, especially when we started bringing in show directors from the outside of the company, as they often had their own people in mind already who they
Yeah.
wanted to work with and stuff. So it's too bad, but
Yeah.
it would have been wonderful to keep that going.
Oh, so the final thing I want to talk to you about is the choreography syllabus.
Mhm.
So we've been working on creating, or you've been working on creating this syllabus for iPath. Can you just quickly give us like a run through of what the syllabus involves?
Yeah. So the syllabus is basically an organized. It comes from like decades of observation. It comes from making mistakes myself. It comes from watching other people's mistakes. Uh, it comes from watching other people. I guess their, I don't know how to explain this, but their unconsciousness with
Hmm.
respect to what they're doing. And then it also takes my Cartesian side, um, and kind of puts things into a little bit more of a concrete approach where you can actually because a lot of choreography programs are based on the emotional approach and on, you know, feeling and all this other stuff, which is important. But when you're coming into something like choreography and you've never done it before, especially if you've never done it before, and you you just don't know how to start. You don't know what to do. Just simply, what are we doing? What are we trying to do? And then how can I get there? You know, outside of the whole um, being inspired by a garden or whatever, whatever your inspiration is, uh, just concretely, what are we doing? What are the traps to avoid? You know, what are things that many other choreographers have done that just don't work? And so there's a lot of very concrete steps, not necessarily steps, but a description of the different types of objectives and paths and ways of getting there, and what that tends to produce as a result. And then because rules are made to be broken, right?
Yeah.
So nothing's really laid out as a rule. It's laid out as an opening of getting people to be conscious of the actual structure of things, the actual what's important in certain contexts, what tends to bring out more emotional, how important is the movement, and also just the discussion of copyright. What is actually copyrightable? Uh, Questions like, if I have a dancer who comes in and there's an improvisation section, does that make that dancer a co-choreographer? Things like that. And the answer to that is no, but we explain why. And
Yeah.
and also, it even gets into managing your team. You know, how to, not necessarily techniques, because that would take too long to explain, because there's a lot in there, but at least some of the basics about team management that is really important, because as a choreographer you are definitely managing a team. And there's it's another skill, it's a separate skill, but it goes hand in hand with the creative side. You can't ignore one without the other. You know, you need to be able to do both. Otherwise, you could be the most brilliant person in the world, but if you can't work with people, you're doomed to fail, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Well, all the information on the iPath choreography syllabus and the course that you'll be leading is going to be on our website, www.i-path.biz. And the syllabus is accredited by GetQ, Global Education Training and Qualifications. And we're going to be delivering the syllabus and the course with our partner, Choreography Online. So just finally, Rick, tell us about Choreography Online, because it's pretty fantastic what you've created.
Choreography Online is, if I were to just simplify it, dumb it down to the most simple description possible, it's the Amazon of choreography.
Yeah,
But choreography for the stage. So just as you would need a license to use music in a show or on a video, um, this is a way for people to get a license to use choreography. So you can take any of the choreographers who are on there. They have pieces that are already done, and you can just go on and say, well, I want this for my competition season, and they have different kinds of licenses depending on how many shows you anticipate using it for. And you can buy a license that is going to be good for a year, and so you're free and clear. You've got official permission. You don't have to worry about the choreographer seeing it and going, hey, wait a minute, that's my piece, and then suing you for $1 million. But on the other end, for a choreographer, it gives them a chance to, because there are a lot of choreographers out there, and choreographers and we all know how this works in the dance industry. You spend months working hard with dancers creating this piece. You do 3 4 shows, and then it just collects dust after that.
yeah,
This is a way for choreographers to be able to resell that piece, but because we're on the internet, well, anyone all around the world could use that. So someone in Australia might never know about the works of a UK choreographer or a choreographer from LA, and would never have the money to fly those people in, even if they did know about them, pay for their, the lodging and their salary and all that. So they would just not do it. But in this, with something like this, they could say, oh, well, I like this piece. We can perform it, and it's within our budget. So it pretty much opens a whole new market for choreographers to resell their old stuff without having to put in so much effort and time.
That's amazing. Well, I'm going to be using it because the amount of times that Easter passes and I'm preparing my students for our annual summer show, I get into the studio and I do step ball change, and then I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do now. So, what's next? So yeah, I'll be using it definitely for sure.
Yeah, so we're building the catalog slowly. It's up to the choreographers to put their stuff in there, and we do have an evaluation process. So it kind of weeds out the people who are not really choreographers, and people who there's a minimum standard.
Yeah,
but for I guess for the UK crowd, we do have a couple pieces from Ricky Jinks, and we have one from Ryan Jenkins, and we're expecting more in the future. But we have other people too, and it's slowly being built. So, but I would for UK, I would say go for someone you don't know. Go for someone in Canada or in the United States or in Australia.
Yeah.
Try out different people, because now you can. Now it's not going to cost you, £20,000 to bring them in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. All right, thank you so much, Rick. And we look forward to working with you with the iPath choreography syllabus and the course. So, like I said before, go to www.i-path.biz for more information on the choreography syllabus. And you can also check out I can't even say the word now, I've said it so many times, Choreography Online, which is literally www.choreography.online. Thank you so much, Rick.
Thanks, David.
And thank you so much to our listeners. Tune in next week when we'll be talking to iPath's patron, Ross Campbell, Professor of Singing at the Royal Academy of Music. Until then, stay safe and see you soon.